Good evening everyone and welcome to an Aussice Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update tonight, the 21st of February 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo, and before we start tonight I'd like to just give a quick shout out to a group of students we talked to, or I talked to this earlier today, about tropical cyclones and what we do at Aussice Cyclone Chasers, the Year 9 students from Ignatius Park College. So we welcome you on board and we hope that there might be a cyclone for you to have a look at what we do firsthand later on in March. In anticipation of that, let's have a look at what is going on currently and what we're going to see in the future. Once again, over the past 24 hours across central inland Queensland and northern inland Queensland, we've seen some big rainfalls, again 50 to 100 mils in parts, but generalised 25 to 50 millimetre falls. We continue to see some rainfall over the northern parts of the Northern Territory. That dry air didn't probably move as far north as we expected it to, and we still managed to get a fairly northeast to easterly, fairly moist flow into this region. So all that southerly or southeasterly air didn't quite make it all the way to the tip, and we'll have a look at where that's expected to go. But really over now, if it hasn't made it by say Saturday, the chances are that we're going to continue to see activity through this region into next week as a tropical low pushes westwards towards the Kimberley coastline across the base of the top end. So any chance of drying out probably fades by about Sunday or Monday, where the moist air is likely to kick back in and we're likely to see more scattering of showers and storms again. Over Queensland, we're going to see a big decrease in activity and a centralisation of activity in the northern and far northern regions. And over the Kimberley, we'll finally start to see an increase in rainfall as well as that tropical low pushes to the west. But this is the last 24 hours, so there's been once again some very good falls over the inland parts of Queensland. So looking at the week that was, once again Queensland, look at this, beautiful rainfalls across most inland regions of 50 millimetres plus for the week. Some really heavy rain around that Townsville area we've spoken about. Torres Strait we've spoken about, and northern inland Queensland we've already spoken about, so we're not going to rehash all that. Unfortunately, anywhere south of Mackay, or just south of about Serena at least, all the way down to the southeast Queensland coastline, got very little, and parts of the hinterland region, so anywhere from Emerald to sort of Roma and east of that, got very little in the past week, and unfortunately that doesn't look like it's going to change. That rain will seep back to the west, and over the Northern Territory, as I said, we'll see an increase in rainfall again into next week. Also, rainfall of note is around the Darwin region. They've had a very active week as well as the Tiwi Islands up here. As we check out Northern Australia, we see the monsoon has eased somewhat over the Timor Sea and the Indian Ocean. We've seen very much a decrease in activity there. We've seen continued activity over the northeastern parts of the continent on the monsoon trough. It hasn't weakened as quickly as we expected it to, but it is weakening. It is on a weakening trend, and it is starting to push northwards as well. The inland trough over Queensland, therefore, is still being fed by a fairly moderate monsoon, and we're continuing to see a scattering of fairly heavy showers and storms in the inland region. We also saw a big blob of thunderstorm activity out here in the western Coral Sea, but it has since been sheared away and is not suspect for development into a cyclone. As we head further east towards the Fijian region and the Solomons, that's where we're starting to see an enhancement of activity. And look, that is more than likely going to be where we're going to see our next tropical low or tropical cyclone, followed by the Western Australian region after that. So as we head into tomorrow, we're going to see a weakening, general weakening of rainfall across Queensland. We're going to see some patchy areas of enhanced rainfall in the southwestern parts of Queensland. And overall, we're going to see an increase in rainfall in the wet tropics coastline from about Ingham northwards. We're going to continue to see active conditions around the Torres Strait and also possibly the southeastern Gulf because of the presence of a low pressure system right in here, although it is a very weak low, and so it's not suspect for development just yet into a cyclone. Now what happens on Sunday is we have that low pushing westwards towards the western Gulf of Carpentaria, and so you can see a general increase in rainfall as the low does develop slightly, but still not suspect for cyclone formation just yet. It may actually run out of time before things get favourable for it to become a cyclone, and therefore cross the coast in the Northern Territory. on the Monday. But over Queensland, we can see that that rain continues to push a little bit further to the north, now located, the centralised area of rainfall now located probably just north of Cairns on the Sunday. And the Torres Strait continues to be quite active as the monsoon just refuses to completely die off. On the Monday, we see that rainfall now starts to penetrate westwards across the base of the top end. We see rainfall in Queensland really easing off, even on the coast now on the Monday. And we see just isolated showers and storms redeveloping in the far western parts of the state. And we see more rainfall starting to penetrate further to the south in the Northern Territory. Very, very dry over Western Australia in the meantime as well, folks, so that's something to be aware of. As we head to Tuesday, that low is now well and truly into the Northern Territory and pushing westwards, and we see rainfall accordingly pushing westwards with it. We see a very big easing off anywhere on the East Queensland coast to very, very isolated showers. And we see possibly an enhancement of rainfall in the far western parts of Queensland there as showers and storms become more widespread again in this region, although nothing drought-breaking, nothing like what we've seen the past week or so out in Queensland. After Tuesday, we get into the interesting period, because after Tuesday we're going to see that low continue to push westwards into the Kimberley region and then possibly west off the coast of the Kimberley. And by about day 7 or 8, we could actually see a tropical cyclone located off Western Australia, or at the very least a tropical low that's developing and deepening near the coast of the Kimberley at that time. So, folks, between Tuesday and Friday next week, this could be a fairly active region to watch, particularly in terms of cyclone development. We also have continuation of just shower and storm activity penetrating a long way south and a long way south over Queensland. So this is once again good follow-up rain for the far western regions of the state, but really it's hard to call it follow-up rain because there's a lot of places that were in the far west of the state that did miss out on the latest bout of rain. So I guess this is their chance at getting some rain. The issue that we're going to face with a lot of farmers and graziers in Queensland is the fact that we may not get good follow-up rain for a long time to come yet, because some of the longer-term predictions in this region are fairly dry over the next 3 or 4 weeks. But I guess we live in hope. So if we look at the MJO, that's enough talking about rain. Now we're going to start talking more cyclones now, because that's really what we're interested in here at OCC. So looking at the MJO, once again, if you don't know what this is, I don't have time to explain it in the videos, please go to Google, please go to Wikipedia. They'll give you some really good information about what the MJO is. But at the moment, we're seeing it in the Western Pacific or Eastern Coral Sea region, and we're going to see it continue progressing eastwards into the Fijian region over the next 5 to 7 days, and this is why we're really looking at that Fijian region as possibly firing up into a tropical cyclone in the medium term. And then after that 5 to 7 day period, in the second week, we see the MJO not really push too much further to the east into phase 8, but really start to die off as well, so it will play less of an impact on weather conditions and cyclone formation potential as we head into week 2. So for week 1 though, really we're watching the Fijian region quite closely now for development of a cyclone. So let's see what the models are saying about that. You can already see by day 4 the UKMet model already has a tropical low forming in the Vanuatu region, or the Western Fijian region, around about 170 degrees east. Now that's already happening by next Tuesday, so it's happening a little bit sooner than we anticipated. We were thinking more mid to late next week, but the UKMet model is pretty aggressive in developing a tropical low in this area early next week. If we look at Tuesday next week on the European model, we also see the tropical low forming out here right around that Vanuatu region. And the European model pushes this fairly quickly to the east-southeast or southeast in response to a trough system in through the southwest Pacific. So this ridge won't be able to pick it up and push it west towards Australia, according to the Euro. So that's pretty good guidance according to most of the models. They do this very similar thing, develop this thing out here early next week, and as we head into later next week, push it in a southeasterly direction out here towards the southwest Pacific. Not really any modelling suggesting that it's going to push west towards Australia at this point in time. It just looks like this trough is being fairly well predicted by every global model, and the trough becomes the leading influence in this system pushing in a southeasterly direction, whereas this ridge doesn't penetrate far enough northwards, and the trough really is in control of the system from the moment it develops until the moment it dies. So at this point in time, folks, there's a fairly good confidence level that a tropical cyclone will form in the southwest Pacific around the Vanuatu, or just to the east or south of Vanuatu, around about mid to late next week. But at this stage there's also a fairly high degree of confidence, probably higher than we would normally have in this region, that the system will push in a southeasterly direction, just at the moment at least. So if we take a look at what this looks like on day 4 using the ensemble guidance, you can see that tropical low out near Vanuatu on Tuesday, and as we head towards Wednesday you're going to see the low pushing in a southerly or southeasterly direction there according to the GFS ensemble. Then as we head towards Thursday, you'll see the low continuing overall to push in a southeasterly direction further and further away from Australia. By now there is a little bit of variation though in terms of exactly where it's going to be, just because the ridge could just be starting to influence the system back to the west, but it is a big outlier, that one. If you see the yellow blob starting to head towards New Caledonia there and starting to push back in a westerly direction, that is a big outlier. Overall the system is expected to continue moving in a south to southeast direction. Then as we head to day 7, we see the system stalling, and that's probably in response to the ridge trying to build underneath, but overall the ridge doesn't take hold of the system. And as we head into days 8, day 9 and day 10, the system remains pretty well quasi-stationary, or actually starts to come back towards, or sorry, it stays quasi-stationary or just continues moving in a southeast direction. So really at this point in time none of the model guidance puts this as a threat towards Queensland whatsoever. I guess the one thing you could just note in the GFS is we are looking at the potential for a new Gulf of Carpentaria low there on day 7. And that low at the moment, according to the ensemble guidance, is pushing in a fairly slow south to southeast direction as well, and hitting the Western Cape. Now if that happens, and you can see there it's hitting the Western Cape by next weekend, if that does happen we could see a fairly big increase in rainfall across northern and northwestern Queensland, and there it is there by day 10. But look, that's an outlier as well, so we're not expecting that to happen, but there is just that slight chance of it may happen. As we head now to Western Australia though, we will see the development of a tropical low, or we've already started to see the development of a tropical low in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now as we head further into the forecast period into mid next week, we're going to see that low across the base of the top end. As we head into later next week, we'll start to see that low pushing offshore by around about Friday or Saturday, or sorry, by Friday or Saturday according to this guidance. So there we have it, just pushing offshore there on Friday. We see the system by Monday the 3rd of March though actually lying well off the Pilbara coastline and possibly a tropical cyclone, but the guidance has varied on exactly where that cyclone will lie, whether it'll be very close to the coast or whether it'll be a long way off the coast. The guidance is a bit patchy on what it's going to do. So if we compare that guidance to the European, which is a little bit more accurate than the GFS, so if we look at next Tuesday on the European, we see that that tropical low region around Vanuatu is present there too, and we also see a weak signature of a low across the base of the top end. Now as we head to Wednesday, the low across the top end sort of pushes just into the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. The low in the Vanuatu region pushes in a southeasterly direction as we head to Wednesday. Then on Thursday, something interesting, I guess we have a low pressure region in here in the North Kimberley, but we also possibly could still have the low lying in the eastern parts of the Northern Territory in case it doesn't move as quickly to the west as forecast. We continue to see this lower pressure region in the Vanuatu to Fiji region. Look, the European isn't as intent on making this a cyclone, but the European is also quite, I guess one of its downfalls is it is very conservative in forming tropical cyclones in a long lead time. So it tends to underestimate, particularly the ensemble tends to underestimate potential for cyclone development. So we just need to be careful of just looking at this and going, there's not going to be a cyclone there, just because the ensemble suggests there might not be. So just being aware of that, I guess we could say that there's a better than 50% chance that we're going to see a cyclone out here in the southwest Pacific. As we head to Friday, things get pretty confused with the Euro. We have the potential for a fairly decent tropical low lying on the eastern Northern Territory region or southwestern Gulf in case it doesn't move west. We have a low pressure region lying just off the Kimberley or just around the Kimberley coastline. We have a new possible low developing out here in the northern Coral Sea. Now we will need to watch this and whether the guidance on this gets stronger, but there is a weak signal out here in the northern Coral Sea. Now, unlike the one in Fiji, this one will push towards the west if it forms up here. There is no trough that this will be attached to. It is very likely to push west if it forms here. Now this isn't going to happen until next Friday at this stage, and once again it is an outlier. It is not the expected thing to happen. It is just something we need to be aware of. So that's on Friday. As we head to Saturday, we continue to see that signature in the northern Coral Sea or the central Coral Sea intensifying a little, and we see that area of low pressure in the far eastern Coral Sea and southwest Pacific continuing there. Because of this high pushing in underneath, the system isn't likely to push very quickly in any direction. We also look back at the Kimberley, I should say, not the Alright, the Kimberley of Western Australia, and we continue to see just generalized areas of low pressure in this area. So there is a lot of model variability as to what's going to happen in the longer lead time. As we head to day 9, we see the system on the Sunday expected by now to be off the Kimberley coastline. I guess the big issue now is how deep is it going to be? Is it going to be a cyclone or is it going to be a low? That's where the variability lies. As we head to the central Coral Sea, we continue to see this intensifying signature of a tropical low on the Sunday the 2nd, and then on Monday the 3rd, we see that whatever's happening in the Coral Sea is now pushing towards the coast. Whatever's happening in the southwest Pacific remains in the southwest Pacific, and whatever's happening off the Kimberley coastline or Pilbara coastline remains fairly slow moving. So folks, it's going to be a very interesting period as we head towards later next week in terms of cyclone development. Look, with all of these potential formations, I guess the one big thing, because they're off the coast, we're not going to see much rain from them unless I guess the eastern Northern Territory one decides to get going, and if that happens we'll see a lot of rain on the eastern parts of the top end, eastern parts of the territory and the southern Gulf. But overall, with all of these scenarios, the Southwest Pacific cyclone, the possible Coral Sea cyclone and the possible Western Australian cyclone, the fact that they're off the coast is probably going to suggest that we're not going to see much rain from any of those systems until they either get on the coast or get close to the coast. But look, the big thing is that there is potential there, and there is potential there off both the west, east and possibly even the Gulf coastlines. So there is certainly going to be a fairly active period regardless of the fact that the MJO is not going to be very active at all. So there are signs, good signs there, that cyclones will form. It's just a matter of where and possibly when. Alright folks, so thanks very much for watching tonight. Once again, our next update, because there are no imminent threats of cyclone activity, our next update will now be Tuesday next week. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday. Hopefully by Tuesday we'll have a much better, much clearer understanding of which of these systems will form, if any, and which direction they will move. Thanks for watching, and good night.